Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the In the 11 podcast. I am your host, Brendan Griffiths, and this is the podcast where we show you what it takes to make it to the highest level and be in the 11. This week is no different. Khari Stephenson steps into the 11 for this week. He is a former MLS player, former top-level player in Sweden, in Norway, capped for his national team, played in Old Trafford. The list goes on and on. I don't want to give it all away here at the top, but trust me, stay tuned because you're going to want to hear his story. Before I kick it over there, I would ask if you could please, whatever platform you're listening on, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, Amazon, all that good stuff, wherever you're at, if you could press pause, quickly go and leave a review for the podcast. Let me know what you think. Helps the podcast grow. I'd appreciate it tremendously. Just takes a quick second out of your day before you jump into the episode. So once you've done that, perfect. Thank you. Appreciate you. Now let's kick it over to myself and Khari. All right. In the 11 with us this week, I am super grateful to be chatting with Khari Stephenson. So excited to dive into his career, all that he has done in the game, and also talk about what he's up to now. But like I said, thanks so much for joining us and being here today, Khari.
Yeah, happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Excellent. So as we just kind of spoke for a second there before we jumped on and started recording, you were a player who kind of went a very different route to become a professional than what a lot of players did at that time. You actually played for a Division III school. What was your choice? What made you decide to go to Division III school like Williams? And how did that come about?
So backing up a little bit from that, I'm actually born and raised in Jamaica, did high school and everything over there. And then I ended up going to boarding school in Connecticut. So I went to Chautauqua Hall. I was there for 2 years. And I had quite a few friends that I grew up with from home who ended up going to Williams. A couple of them went to different boarding schools, Choate, Hotchkiss, Andover, etc. And the reason the friends who told me about Choate and how I ended up there is they ended up going to Williams. And I had some childhood friends I went to elementary school for at Williams. So for me, it was between Williams and Brown. I didn't get into Brown, so I went to Williams. Like Williams is #1 liberal arts school in the country.
Yeah.
So great education. On the Forbes list of best schools in the country, it's Williams, Stanford, and Harvard. So from an academic standpoint, like it was a great school. And my dad's a lawyer, my mom's a PhD. So for them, education was first. So it wasn't that you're going to a sports school, it's you need to go to a good school to get a good education. So main reasons I ended up there.
So was that your motivation as well? Were you more focused on the academics? Was the athletics just kind of an added bonus that you got to go and play soccer at the collegiate level?
No, I actually wanted to play professionally since I was 4 years old.
Okay.
And the reality is it doesn't matter how good you are. If sometimes you need luck, you need to get the right breaks, you need the right people to see at the right time. So I could be the best player in the world, but if the stars don't align, this could never work out.
Yeah.
So it was education first, and then if the soccer worked out, great. So I always have to have your backup plan, which my backup plan is working for me right now.
Yeah.
So I can't complain about that.
Yeah, and it's certainly not a bad school to have a backup plan in terms of, as you just laid out, the academic side, but even on the athletic side, Williams is not is certainly a very strong program when it comes to college soccer as well. It's not just a program to be laughed at or scoffed at. It's a perennial powerhouse in terms of the Division III landscape. So what was those couple of years playing for a program like that? And obviously you had some individual success. What was that time like for you?
Yeah, so in the NESCAC, which is the conference we played in, it's if not the toughest Division 3 conference, it is one of.
Absolutely, yeah.
But our team, in some respects, were too good for the division. We had some international players. So I played under 17 for Jamaica, and under 20 went to the Youth World. I had some teammates who were in the under 17 national team at the time. So like we grew up playing together. So it was, for us, it was like we're all good players, we all know each other, but there's so much to learn more about playing as a team and not just an individual. And it doesn't matter how big, strong, fast, and technically sound you might be. Playing as a team and understanding the game was a lot of what I learned by going to Williams. So, but yeah, I mean, it was a great experience. I learned a lot about fitness because in Jamaica, fitness wasn't really. So, but yeah, good experiences and with great players. We none of my years we actually made it to the championship game. I don't know, we lost in, I don't know, the Sweet 16, the final eight a couple of times, and I don't know, it was tough because you're outplaying teams. Teams would just sit back and defend, and they counterattack, score one goal, and just sit.
Yeah.
So, but you know, it's life, learning experiences, living and learning.
Yeah.
Another thing too is, you know, with Williams being Division 3, it really has nothing to do with the quality of the team or the players. It's Division 3 because it's a small school that doesn't have any large graduate programs, and that's the big differences between colleges and universities.
Yeah, I've spoken to some players in the past on this podcast that have said, you know, one player I interviewed a few weeks ago that went Division 3 as well, that's now playing professionally. He said, for me, it was an opportunity where, sure, maybe I had some interest from Division 1, but the Division 3 program I was able to go to, and I was able to be a part of a program that was very successful, played at a very high level, lots of good players around me, and I got an opportunity to play right away and play a lot for my whole 4 years. Would you say that was another benefit that you kind of received from playing at a school like Williams? Whereas, sure, obviously you could have gone to a Division 1, but who knows if you would have had the same showcase to be able to play right from the start.
Yeah, that's fair. And the truth is, Division 3, it's not highly scouted or highly watched. So the odds of getting out of a Division 3 school and going pro are not big.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, even if I may have been one of the better players on the team, even if there was this whole seniority thing. Well, you're a freshman, they're seniors, they have to get their jobs first. If things don't work out, then you can go play. So that was kind of frustrating in itself. It was what it was. So, you know, coming as a freshman, I wasn't starting from the get-go. But I got a lot of minutes. Scored some goals, had some important goals. And you know, it's a lot of it is character building as well. So learning about, look, this is just what it is. Just keep doing your thing, and when your chance comes, just make use of it. And that's exactly what I did when my opportunity came.
Yeah, and you just mentioned there that it's, you know, Division 3 is not as highly scouted as other levels or other leagues, and it's difficult. The chances, as you said, are slim for a player to be able to go from the Division 3 college level to the professional game. But, you know, you were able to do it. How do you think you were able to do it in those 4 years to be able to make that jump? That's defy those slim odds.
So I was actually, I think I was all conference all 3 years. Well, I don't think I made it freshman year, but I was conference player of the year. My junior and senior year, I was All-American. Junior and senior, I think I could have been first team All-American junior and senior year. And I was one of 2 Division 3 players who got invited to the MLS Combine. I think there were 60 players, 1 Division 2, 2D3, and like 57 Division 1 players. So, you know, I was playing with the national team. I got called up a couple of times to train with the full senior national team. I played under 17, went to the under 20 Youth World Cup. I was playing on the under 23 national team, so did the whole Olympic qualifying thing. So for me, I feel I had a lot more international experience and exposure than most of the guys who came through D1. And it was just for me to show that I was just as good, if not better than them at the Combine. So obviously the combine, there were 4 teams, and I wasn't starting because there were all these big name D1 guys. So, they played, and I think I was in the first wave with substitutions. Yeah, I ran on, did a couple step overs, ran by a couple of guys, and then hit a shot, and they're like, oh, I guess he can play. So then since then, I started every game, and even the referees were like, look, you're one of the guys that they're really looking at. You're one of the names now, so just kind of do your thing and keep it cool. So, but yeah, so the combine had a lot to do with it for playing in MLS. So I did well at the combine, ended up getting injured in one of the last games. I got drafted, pick number, I don't know, 27th or 28th to Chicago. Chicago ended up drafting 10 players. Most were D1, and I ended up having a longer career than I think all of them. So, sometimes it's, even if things may not work out from the get-go, just give it time if you do anything, and,
Yeah. Obviously you have, you're in a different situation than many Division III players, as you mentioned, with that national team experience, which I definitely want to get to later. But you said you experienced it a little bit at the combine, but did you experience that in addition, maybe early on in your career, where kind of people would ask, oh, where did you play before this? And was there sort of a stigma, or, would people say, what, you played Division III, and kind of immediately already put you into a box?
Yeah, I think that definitely may have happened. And it's like, oh, where'd you go to school? Oh, Williams College. You're like, where? William and Mary? So at the time, they've never heard of Williams, which was fine. But as soon as I started playing and showing what I could do, then everything was fine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the beauty of football, is it doesn't matter until the ball gets rolled out there, and then all of a sudden it's like, it just, can you play? And that's all that matters.
Exactly.
So you get drafted by Chicago, but obviously we didn't wind up playing for Chicago. Kind of walk me through what happens after you get that phone call and they say, okay, yep, we drafted you. What's the next maybe couple of weeks, couple of months like?
Yeah, so I was watching the combine online and got a call from the GM saying, hey, we just selected you, we're looking forward to work with you. We can't wait to have you in and whatnot. So senior year in college, and I wasn't not going to finish school. Right at the time where the salaries were for MLS, there was no chance that I would not finish school to go play. So I told them, look, I have to finish school, but I can get some time off to come to one of your preseason camps. So I ended up going to Portugal. Spoke to all my professors, told them what was going on. They're like, wow, this is great. Like, you're fine. Just, go do your thing. And when you get back, we'll talk. So I went to Portugal. I think it could have been 10 days or 2 weeks. And I think I did pretty well. When I got back, I was speaking with the coach, and he was saying, look, we drafted 10 guys. We have a lot of these bigger name guys that we're probably going to sign to, a developmental contract, or, actually, I think he didn't have a lot of roster spots.
Okay.
So all he had may have been 1 or 2 developmental spots. And he was like, there are these guys. So I don't know, but it's your only option. So I thought I was better than a developmental contract, but it was what it was. And, in speaking to my agent, he was like, let's go see what can happen elsewhere. So during my spring break, I ended up training with Kansas City. I went to Kansas City, trained with them for 2 weeks on my spring break, and I felt more comfortable. I felt more settled. Even though in Chicago, I had 2 friends that I grew up playing with, and one grew up watching in Andy Williams and Damani Roth. Damani Roth was Rookie of the Year the previous year, and Andy Williams is we ended up going to the same elementary school. He was 4 years ahead of me, but he went to the World Cup at like 18 years old and whatever. So he was a player I always looked up to. So I was actually at the time hoping that Chicago would have worked out, because there would be 2 people that I knew and whatnot. But back to Kansas City. So I felt like I did well. I felt like I would have actually gotten a fair chance. And they only had a developmental contract, which turned out to be fine. Living in Kansas City is a lot cheaper than living in Chicago. So yeah, ended up signing with them, went back to school, finished up, and then came back a couple months later.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but before we dive into that Kansas City a little bit, you brought up something interesting there. Obviously, you made the decision to continue to finish out your degree and have that. And I wonder if you can speak to this at all, kind of the current way that the soccer world is in the US, right? Like I remember when I was coaching in Philly, I was talking to some players, pretty good players that were coming out of Villanova, and they had some interest from, like, right now what's called the USL Championship, like the second division. But they had this Villanova degree, and they had it in finance, and the salaries that you were maybe looking at coming out with a degree, especially, one from Williams, probably if you had gone and gotten a job, you would have made much more money right out of the gate than you would if you would go play professional soccer. You're on TV kicking the ball. Everyone thinks that's where all the money is. Can you speak to that at all? Like, did you maybe experience other players that kind of noticed that and said, maybe I'll just, go where I can have a little bit better of an income, safer income because of my degree? Or was that something that maybe crossed your mind at all?
So for me, it was playing. I don't like saying soccer, so playing football was a dream.
True.
So for me, it's like, let me go try it out. If it works out, great. If not, oh well. But I should at least give it a fair shot. So I have my degree. If I make nothing for the next year or two, it's whatever. I've had a great experience, and I at least tried. So because the risk reward is a huge thing with the risk reward. And then if it doesn't work out, it's fine. Like, you can go get a normal job and like go figure life out. So for me, it was, salary was what the salary was, and I needed to make a name for myself before my salary would increase, which it did multiple times over the many years. So was I looking at USL? No, not really. Contracts are very different. You only get paid during the season. The salaries are usually a lot less. However, there are a few players who are better off playing in USL, not in MLS, because their salaries were higher. But what tends to happen is that you might get stuck. There are a handful of players who might move up from USL into MLS. So I didn't want to go into USL. I'm not saying it's a bad league or anything, but just for me and my goals and where I wanted to be, I think that may not have been the best fit for me. So for some players, it works out perfect. They might be able to play in their hometown. So, but yeah, I mean, for some players, I actually think I do have some guys who went to the combine. Like Kevin R, I can remember, he went to Harvard, right? So coming out of Harvard, he's a good player. He ended up stopped playing after a year or two because it just kind of didn't make sense from a financial standpoint. And there are quite a few who went through the same thing. They were either on a developmental contract, not making anything, or league minimum, not making anything, and they weren't getting a fair chance.
Yeah.
Or maybe they got a chance, didn't do well. Not saying that they're bad players, but it was just time for them to move on. You did it for 2-3 years, and time to move on. And a stat that most people don't realize is that most professional players, not just in soccer, football, the lifespan is 3 years. Right? So it's a small percentage who actually get to play, 5, 10, 12 years in my case. So, but yeah, I mean, from that standpoint, I was like, look, I'll try it. I'll see how it works out. And if it does, great. If not, I'll just go figure life out and get a normal 9 to 5.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the way that, all footballers kind of have to look at it. Unless you're playing in the biggest leagues in the world, it's going to be like that. It's going to be a bit of a grind in the beginning, but you got to do it for the love of the game. And like you said, you had a pretty decent fallback option if things didn't work out. So talk to me about that first year in Kansas City. Now you're in a full-fledged pro environment. I have to imagine there was a lot of highs and a lot of lows, just adjusting to pro life, to the pro game, and what that was like.
Yeah, it was definitely an adjustment period. Obviously, the pace was a lot faster than college. Players were bigger, they're faster, they're stronger. So that I had the size, speed I was thing, but it's just getting used to the speed of play, playing faster, constantly moving, being fitter. So my fitness level, I was fitter at, in my late 20s than I was at 18. So, definitely had to get used to that. Living away from home, we all went to college, we all lived away from home, whatever. So that wasn't a huge thing. But on the professional scene, you're actually coming in, taking away a guy's game and taking away his livelihood.
Yeah.
So, on some teams, it's like, look, you're doing the same as this guy who's making 5 times more than you. Well, why am I keeping the guy who's making 5 times as much? I'll just bring you in because you're cheaper and you're doing the same job. So that was definitely a real thing that happened. So, in some instances, guys will come in trying to get you hurt just so you couldn't tear their games. But we're all a team and we all have the same common goals. So there was just that line between, you can't take my game, but yeah, we're cool.
Yeah.
So it's all fun and games outside of training, but on the field, it can get pretty intense.
Yeah. I think that was one of the biggest adjustments that I had to kind of come to grips with when, you mentioned that when you're in college, everyone's working for each other and everyone's unified and everyone's working towards this common goal. And yes, there's a competitive nature to it, but there's not kind of that same bite as when you go into a professional environment and you're the young kid off the block and you're about to take away the way that this guy who's been playing in the league for 10 years, this is how he feeds his family, right? Like he sees you coming into training. He sees you as a threat to his livelihood. That's the reality of it. And all of a sudden those dynamics of, we're all best friends and we're training together and, what's better than playing with your buddies every day? It shifts. And, there's great things about that. There's also tough things about that, but it's true. It's one of the toughest things, I think, to kind of quickly make that switch when you get to the pro game.
Yeah, definitely. And then not to mention, it's a very different dynamic from the international stage because then you're all together. It's not about who's taking whose game.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to play. At that level, everyone wants to play. And it doesn't matter who's making what money. It's like we all want to play. And if you're not playing, you're upset. It is what it is.
Yeah. And before you mentioned how maybe the USL might have not been the best fit for you at that time. And when you were maybe kind of getting some games here and there with Kansas City, but it wasn't like the opportunity where you could really kick on and jumpstart your career. Did that concept of maybe, I don't know if I want to go down to the USL, did that kind of influence your decision to then try your luck overseas, or was going overseas always something that you wanted to do, try and play in Europe?
Yeah, going overseas was always something I wanted to do. Growing up as a kid, I wanted to play in the Champions League. I wanted to play on one of these big teams in the world, whether it's like AC Milan or Real Madrid or Juventus or one of them. So my goal was always to go play in Europe. And in the beginning, when I started MLS, there was a reserve league. So even if you may have not been playing with the first team or you may have gotten a couple minutes here or there, the next day you're playing with the reserve team and, other coaches are seeing you. And what might happen sometimes is if a coach may ask about a player, it's like, I think we should start playing him now. Because if not, then he could leave. So, but yeah, so the reserve league was great for the players who weren't playing. It kept us fit and showed us that, and kind of gave us some exposure and experience to playing. But yeah, Europe was where I wanted to go, and after 2 years in MLS, opportunity presented itself, and
did that opportunity present itself in that way? Did you start to perform in the reserve leagues and then all of a sudden people started asking and maybe a connection was made in that way to go overseas?
No. So first year, I was a developmental player, wasn't playing much, got called into the national team towards the end of the season, ended up starting most of the playoff games. Into the MLS Cup. So I think I'm in the history as being the only developmental player to start in an MLS Cup game. And I had more playoff minutes than regular season minutes. So not sure if that's still there, but I know the developmental one is there. Second year, I wasn't playing as much, got in here and there. And then, I don't know, September, they wanted me to go from a regular roster spot down to a developmental spot. So developmental contracts aren't guaranteed. So at the time, I'm like, I've been here a year and a half. The coaches have seen me at my best and at my worst. then that just doesn't make any sense for me to step down to a lower level contract and which had less guarantees. So I trained with a couple of teams. I trained with Columbus and Salt Lake. Things didn't work out there. And then come January, my agent was like, hey, I have a couple of teams who are interested. So Hammarby was one, Hammarby in Sweden, who Phil Anschutz, the owner of the LA Galaxy, has some stake in. So I was to have gone to LA to go train with them. They were doing their preseason down there. And then this other team, guys, wanted to have a look at me first because their preseason started earlier. So I ended up going over to Sweden, and from the second they're like, great, we want him. Sign me up. So from my agent, he was like, look, like, you want to play first team, you want to play every game. So this will be a great opportunity. That team, guys, Gothenburg's Athletic Idrottscup, they at the time just got promoted to the Premier Division. They had a good history, but for the past, 10 years, they fell all the way down and made it all the way back up. So got an opportunity to play. I was playing game in and game out. And it was great for me and my confidence to show, how good a player I could be. I had a great first season and a lot of offers started coming in.
Yeah, that's awesome. What is that like to really, in the early stages of your career, you're getting some time here and there. And obviously, as you mentioned, I did read that about Kansas City. I wanted to ask about that because I thought it was interesting that it was like, didn't have as many, minutes and starts during the year. And then all of a sudden it was like kicked off in the playoffs. So you kind of got a little bit of snapshot of that success, but then Sweden, I'm sure you can attest to this as well. That's where it's like for a season, right? Where you're playing week in and week out and you feel like your confidence is really rising and you've established yourself as I belong here. Like, what is that like for you as a player? As you mentioned, I'm sure it made your confidence soar.
Oh yeah, it was absolutely a great feeling. Seeing yourself in the newspaper every day and people having a lot of good things to say. And it definitely helps your confidence. When you're on cloud nine, your confidence as well. You're in flow where you can do no wrong. Like that was an awesome feeling, and it made me think about I think I could be good enough to play in one of the top leagues in the world. And, let's not forget that teams from Sweden are playing in the Champions League and are playing in the Europa League. And, I got the opportunity to play in the Europa League. Just missed out on Champions League, but, it was a great experience. And it's one that I'll never get for anything else.
Yeah. You just mentioned something there I think is interesting, that kind of idea of playing with confidence and playing in that flow state, sort of. How much do you think you would attribute your success or those moments when you were playing at a super high level to kind of being in that mode where you don't need to think as much, right? And you're not second guessing any decisions and you feel like you're in that flow state. Obviously you said you feel like you kind of captured it in Sweden. How much do you attest to just being mentally kind of in a confident and flow state?
The hardest thing, and you can agree with this, the hardest thing to do as a player is be consistent. So I feel like when I was good, I was really good. But when I was bad, I was not. I was bad. So I think I think I was inconsistent as a player, and it may have hurt my career in certain stages. But yeah, so I had moments where I was in flow. It could have been for months, it could have been for weeks, it could have been for a couple of days. And there's no feeling like it. So the better you're playing, the more consistent you are, there are more moments of that flow experience where best feeling in the world. Everything's just easy. You don't have to think. It's like just walking on water.
Yeah, I think what's so beautiful about football sometimes and also so frustrating is when you do capture that, that run of form, right, where you're playing super well, that there's so many things that can just derail you. Maybe you pick up a little knock or a little injury and then boom, you get thrown out of that consistent rhythm. And then you got to catch it again. And even sometimes it can just be like form just itself kind of ebbs and flows, right? You can have a couple good games and all of a sudden you have a bad game and you have to turn it back around somehow. And it's, like I said, it's one of the great things about the game, but it also can be so frustrating because you're like, 2 weeks ago, I was absolutely flying and what is happening right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes there's no rhyme or reason like why you're not in flow. You're doing everything the same, you're eating the same, you're sleeping the same, daily life's the same, but then you're just off and you have absolutely no reason. You just can't comprehend why. So some people try harder, some may not try as hard because it's like, whatever, it will come back. So, but yeah, to each his own, and it's different for every situation.
Yeah, because I mean, especially I'm sure a player at your level that's, thousands and thousands of hours have been spent training and playing. I know for me, there's times where I can just go into a training and all of a sudden I take a couple touches, play a couple passes, and I'm like, yep, something's off today. I don't know what it is, but it's just something is not clicking. So it's interesting how you can kind of develop that real sense of self as you play the game for so long. But as you're having that confidence in Sweden, and as you mentioned before, you started to get some buzz around you, and also some offers started to pour in. And that led to a move after that first year in Sweden, correct?
Yeah. So after the first year, the top team in the league, AIK Stockholm, bought me. So my old team guys got me for a little or nothing, and they put a high price tag on me, a couple million price tag, which I learned way later on. So flattered, but I didn't get any of it, so I was a little bit upset. But yeah, so when I played with guys to go play against AIK, I'm like, wow, this is there 25, 30,000 people in the stadium. This is a great atmosphere. I would love to play here one day. And my aim when I got to Sweden was to, get in, do well, leave after a year or two, try to go to England or Holland or Spain or somewhere, Germany or wherever.
Yeah. So
after that first year, and these offers started coming in, and I tried to get them to tell me about all of them, but they wouldn't. So the AIK one, I was really looking forward to that one because like Stockholm was an awesome city, and they had great fans. Not saying Geist doesn't have great fans, but it's a numbers game, right?
Yeah.
Geist may have had 10,000 people at the game. At AIK, there were 20,000+. So it was just a great atmosphere, and I'm thinking, you know what? If the opportunity does come, then I'm gonna want to go. So, and then they were playing in the Europa League the next year, just missed out on Champions League because the second to last game the previous season, they tied against my old team. If they had won, they would have won the league and gone to Champions League. So that was a little bittersweet, but it was whatever. So yeah, like AIK was great. I've played with some of the best players I've ever played with, and what I enjoyed most about playing with AIK is, they tried to play. It wasn't like you're stressed, kick the ball out. Tried to play out of every situation, which was a great fit for me. So, but yeah, it was exciting. It was a great experience.
Yeah, you mentioned there that your goal going into Sweden at the start was, I want to go here, for a year, do really well, and then let's see if I can move, maybe to England, Holland, Germany, one of the big ones. And I wanted to ask you, how much do you think a player's career is really determined by what they want to do, right? I want to play here and then play there and play there. Certainly those top level guys, right? Messi says he wants to go play for that club. Well, I'm sure they're probably going to make it work to let him go play for that club. But how much of it is based upon, really kind of what exactly it is that you want to do, and also what is presented to you? You maybe thought, okay, let me see if I can go play in Germany, but this amazing opportunity is presented to Sweden. And as you just mentioned, there's lots of things that are going on behind the scenes that you might not even know about that make it tricky to always just go into exactly where you want to go. So did you notice any of that in your career?
What I will say is, it's a business. There's this whole demand and supply as with everything. And, every team has their group of players, and they may be looking for a specific player that fits a specific role. And if you don't fit that specific role, you're not going to be on the radar. So even if you're doing great things at your team, you just may not be a fit for another team because you just don't have the qualities that you're looking for. Not that you're a bad player, but you just don't fit the mold that they're looking for. You could play the position that their best player plays. So would it really make sense for them to invest that money in having you, and you could be the same age, and just have you sitting on the bench? No. So every team doesn't have a blank checkbook where they can just buy every player, which we're seeing a lot happening nowadays in some of these leagues around the world. But
Yeah.
realistically, it's not something that happens everywhere.
Yeah.
So even though there could have been teams from Germany and from Holland that wanted to get me after guys, but they may have not wanted to pay as much money as the team wanted for me.
Mm.
And it's the team's decision. It's their decision first. They have you on a contract. If they have to agree to a transfer fee, and then you agree to your personal terms if they accept the transfer fee.
Yeah.
So even if the club can say, hey, we want to pay you this, awesome. But if your club is not willing to sell you, then you're not going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just wanted to bring that up because I think sometimes, fans, they just say, they're like, oh, I like that player, he should come to my team, or I like that player, he should go play for that team. And it's a nice, it's a nice thought, it's a nice sentiment, but as you just laid out there, there's so many moving parts, right? A club has to have interest. Can they afford you? What position do you play? Does it work with what they want? The list goes on. And then also it has to be a right fit for the player as well. So there's just, there's so much that goes into players moving from one club to another. I think sometimes, when you watch Sky Sports or anything like that, you think, oh, okay, another transfer, but there's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah, so much.
Yeah. And so you mentioned there when you're at AIK, that was, some of the best players that you had ever played with in your career. What was that like, training day in and day out? Was that one of the highest levels that you've ever been in terms of a training environment?
Yeah, definitely one of the highest levels. Like everyone was comfortable with the ball. And I think it's rare to find every single player to be comfortable with the ball. Doesn't panic when they have the ball. It's not just about kicking the ball away, it's about winning it and keeping possession. So for me, that was great for me.
And I have to ask, obviously, you had professional aspirations from early on, but was there ever a moment, you said you're playing in front of sometimes 25, 30,000 people, I'm sure you're brushing shoulders and training with guys who have huge resumes. Was there ever a moment where you just kind of were like, man, just a few years ago, I was playing NESCAC football?
There may have been on a couple of occasions. I can't quite remember any, but I'm sure there could have been a couple of occasions to be like, hey, kid from Jamaica, and look where I am.
Yeah.
Even played against England in Old Trafford, like 70,000 people against England. So, there were definitely a couple moments where I was like, yeah. Didn't believe I would be here, but
yeah, I'm sure there's some pinch me moments, kind of as your career goes on. And you mentioned that the national team, I know you've obviously up to this point, you've had some experience with the youth teams and trained with the senior team. Where does it fit in? Where do you make your debut for the senior national team? Is it while you're over here playing in Europe, or was this still while you were in MLS?
I played in an exhibition game with the full national team. I was one of the under 23 players. I think I could have been 21, 22 at the time. So that was the first taste of it. But then that was just against some team from Brazil with, whoever. But the first game that may turn up on like anything is like, here's my first appearance for the full national team. That was my first year with Kansas City. And it was after I got called in for that game that I started playing. So yeah, being able to represent your country, no feeling like it. So for me, it was, I want to play for my country. I want to go to the World Cup and play in Champions League. So, but yeah, good experience. And I got to play with some of the guys I grew up playing with on some of those youth teams.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you could, just to elaborate it all, because, I'm sure we have lots of players who have played at pretty high levels that listen to this show and people who are fans of the game, but that representing your national team that's the elite of the elite, that's the highest level that there is in the world. And I'm sure there's no feeling like it to put on that jersey and have the flag and, hear your anthem and just everything, can you put it into words what it's like to represent your team at the first team level?
I doubt I can put it into words or say it as eloquently as I'd like to say. But you know, not just having the jersey on, but having it on in your home country with your fans supporting, having the anthem behind you, having your family may be at the stadium watching a game. I can't put words to what that feels like, but it was definitely a great feeling to be able to represent your country and you know, play on their behalf, because it's not something that most players around the world get to experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other, I'm sure there's tons of highlights from playing with your national team. I know one you just mentioned too, you know, when you're playing at Old Trafford and you're playing in the midfield with what was it, Gerrard, Lampard, and Beckham all in your midfield.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure that has to be up there on your top memories of as you look back at your career.
Yeah, definitely. But you know, at the same time, as a player, you can't think of it as like, oh my gosh, I'm playing against all these guys, because then that's just not going to help your confidence.
Yeah.
So, you know, what I used to help my confidence was just to say, look, they're just a player like you and I. They just may be on TV more and playing on a bigger club and making a lot more money, but they're still human,
Yeah.
you know. And are they bigger, faster, stronger than me? No. So then that was how I psyched myself up for games and didn't let the moments get the better of me. So it's like, look, we're all gonna make a mistake. It happens. You know, no one has 100% perfect game. You'll have a bad touch, a bad pass. Like a mistake's gonna happen. Like fine. But don't get it twisted in your head that these players are X or whatever their names are, and they're way better than you. And I think that happens a lot when you have a lot of these bigger teams playing against these smaller teams, where they get overwhelmed by the name of a player, and because they watch them on TV or use them in a video game many times. But I'd always bring people down to that, you know, they're just an individual like everyone else. So, but yeah.
Yeah. And up to this point in your career, you've played against tons of top level professionals, trained and been on the same team as tons of top level professionals. I'm curious if there's anything that you saw, like all the, you know, the really great players that you saw, were there ever things that they all kind of had in common? Were there things that you just like, okay, if you saw him train, you knew he was going to be a good player because they always kind of thought a certain way or approached the game a certain way or approached training a certain way?
Yeah. But then again, to be fair, there are some players who in training, they're just kind of joking around. But then during the game, then it's like, we've never seen this player in training, but they're the best players in games.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, there are players who are awesome in training and just never great in games. And then that's part of where the consistency comes in. But yeah, there are some players who just their work ethic and everything in training, you know, it's everything has to be done at the highest level. You know, there's no fooling around, there's no joking around. It's like, come on, we're here to play. Like, let's go play. But yeah, and it takes strong personalities to be able to be there 100% of the time and to give everything that you have. So, but yeah, definitely there were some players trying to think now who in training. You know what? I try not to call names because I don't want anyone to get upset that I didn't call their name. But yeah, but I've had, so I'll call Chris Wondolowski's name. So, but even Chris, like when I came to San Jose, Chris was just another player on the team. He wasn't a big name. He wasn't scoring a lot of goals. Hardworking player who, you know, did the simple things well and wasn't fast. Wasn't dribbling by guys. You know, wasn't, you know, one of these kind of players. But Chris, after training, he worked really hard on finishing. You know, he's always doing well in the finishing drills. And like every single day after training, he's working on finishing. And you could see how he ended his career, you know, leading goal scorer in MLS history. He definitely became a much better player over time, and his career shows by itself. So, but yeah, he was always working extra hard after training and working on finishing. And he was the best finisher in MLS history.
Yeah, I think I'm happy you said that, because that's definitely something you consistently hear about the top level players, is that they're always doing the extras, right? You know, after training, before training, they're always doing the most. And sure, there's those outliers, like I heard a couple weeks ago, I think Jermaine Defoe did an interview where he's talking about Gareth Bale, how he would just, he wouldn't train, during the week.
Mhm.
He would show up, he would, do the warm up, maybe the rondo, and just kind of, but then all of a sudden on match day, he would turn up. And, there's players that can do that for a while, but eventually that catches up to you. And I'm sure we look at Gareth Bale's career now, and yes, he's been an amazing player, but I mean, he could have been a dominant, world-class level player for a long time. So it is true. The ones who just consistently put in work time after time and do extra, it usually it pays off. So as we detoured there a little bit, I think at this point now, as we're going through your career kind of here, this is when you wind up in Norway after the year in Sweden.
So 1 year in Sweden at Guys, then went to AIK. Having a great preseason, ended up breaking my arm a week before the season started. I was playing the best I was playing. I was in flow state the whole time. And then after that injury, I was never the same player. So
your whole career,
never the same player.
Oh.
So that I don't know. I lost something. I don't know what exactly it was, but I lost something. I mean, I still played another 9-10 years, but still, right? So yeah, was at AIK another year and a half, and then ended up going to Norway. At the time I wasn't playing as much. AIK brought in some new players, and the coach just said, "Look, we brought in some guys. We have these young guys coming up. You're behind them. Yes, you have 2 more years on your contract, so you can stay if you want. I think you're a great guy, but this is just where things are right now." So obviously I wanted to play, and at the time I'm like, nope, I'm fine. I'll keep working, and things will change, whatever. But then I thought about it, and then I'm like, you know what? Here's this opportunity. Coach really wants me. I went and met with them, and he's like, here's how I see you fitting into my team. Here's where I think you'd be great for us. So for me, I was like, all right, well, I'll go for a year and a half. I'll do well, and then I'll move again. So that's how I ended up going to Norway. That first year, I went to the team Allison. They're at the bottom of the table. The team was doing better. They ended up firing the coach who brought me there a month after I got there.
Oh.
Brought in this other coach who wasn't my biggest fan. But yeah, we ended up, playing in the playoff game at the end of the season because we're one of the bottom 3 teams. Ended up staying in the league. The next year, yeah, had a decent year the next year, and then had a decent year the next year. Got injured again, and then wasn't playing as much. It took me a little while to get back to normal after the injury, and then ended up going to San Jose on loan. And then that was awesome. I was enjoying playing again. The team at the time wasn't doing great, but we ended up making it into the playoffs and went all the way to the conference championship game where we lost.
So that time, it sounds like after that first injury, and then you felt like you couldn't really get back to the same player that you were. Did that, it sounds like you spoke to it maybe took away your love a little bit for the game. You have those back-to-back injuries, and it was a tough season in Norway, but when you found San Jose, it was almost like, here's an opportunity for me to play well again, be healthy and kind of find my footing again.
Yeah, so I was in Allison for 2.5 years. Yeah, well, it's 3 years if you look at everything. So the second year was fine. It was okay. We did okay in the league. I was playing, maybe not playing all the time, but I did play quite a few games, and we won quite a few games and everything. The second year, I got injured. We won the league, the Open Cup, the Knockout Cup, similar to the Lamar Hunt US Open Cup or the FA Cup.
Yeah.
So by winning that, and I scored the first ever penalty in a Norwegian cup game for the record.
Look at you, just setting records left and right.
Left and right. So But yeah, so that was a good year for us and the team. We ended up, I don't know, sixth, seventh, eighth in the league, fifth, I don't remember, but won a cup, have a trophy to show for it.
Yeah.
And then the next year, I got injured in the Super Cup game. So that's the game between the winner of the cup and the winner of the league. Um, I was out for kind of 2 months. They couldn't really figure out what was going on, but something was off. So then coming back, the team wasn't doing well while I was injured. And for some reason, the coach said I didn't fit anymore. I still had 2 years on my contract. I was one of the higher paid guys on the team, and he was saying I make too much money and like whatever. So before the season started, I asked my agent to look around. I'm saying, okay, like, I've been here almost 2 years now. This is a year I want to make a move. So I'll do what I can do. You go do what you can do. So, and that's just me being the best player I can be and him getting the right people to come and watch. So unfortunately, I got injured, right before the season started. Came back from injury, wasn't playing much. And then, then I ended up going to San Jose on loan. So agent was like, look, San Jose is interested. The coach remembers you from way back when I played against them and knocked them out of the MLS playoffs, whatever. So I told him, I'm not ready to go back to MLS yet. Let's see what else he can find. So, well, long story short, I ended up going back to MLS and trained with them for a week. And I think it would have been great to not just get away from Norway at the time, but to be in a situation where I'd be playing regularly.
Yeah.
And that would help my confidence and help everything else. So, but yeah, and then I'd been away in Europe for 5 years, so it was coming closer to home, being closer to family and friends. So yeah, so came over and team was doing well, I was doing well, and it's a good decision.
Yeah. So it sounds like for you also some priorities, off the field changed a little bit. Whereas early on it was, I just want to play highest level. I just want to play Champions League. And not to say that MLS isn't still a high level, but also there was, there's other factors. Can I be a little bit closer to friends and family? And, Sweden and Norway are amazing places, I'm sure, but also US is kind of where you grew up. It's home. There's a little bit more of a comfort level there, being able to come home and play there.
Yeah, and home allows with Jamaica, FYI. So, but then again, I came to San Jose on loan, so I still had a year in Norway after the loan ended.
Okay.
But long story short, we mutually terminated the agreement. So my aim was to go back and finish off that year in Norway, be a free agent, and see what was what. So, but yeah, we agreed to mutually terminate the agreement, got a little payout, whatnot, and then ended up going to San Jose. Signed I think 4-year MLS 4-year contract. So, 2 years, I think it was 2 years guaranteed and then option years or something like that. Or it could have been like, 3 option years, but I hit some criteria. So I was there for 2 years. And then went to Salt Lake for a year, came back for 2 more years.
Those experiences that you had, it sounds like now you've had a couple up to this point in your career where you kind of have a coach saying like, hey, whether it's a new coach that's brought in, they say, I don't think I see you in my plans, right? I know you're on a contract, but I want to move it a different direction, right? I like this player better. It's hard to just say, here's the advice because every situation is different, but what might you say to a player that's going through something like that, where maybe they come into a situation and they are in favor, and then all of a sudden the coach says, hey, you're not in my plans anymore, because I'm sure on the one hand you can say, hey, I'm going to prove the coach wrong, but on the other hand, maybe it's best for you to leave. Is there any advice that you might give in that regard?
And it's always difficult when you're in the situation, because where you are is where you want to be. And granted, at AIK, business decision. Like the club was like, look, we paid a lot of money for you. This team is willing to pay almost as much as we paid for you. So for the club, it's a good business. For you, it would be great for you. So and I appreciated the honesty. Just be honest with me, and he was 100% honest with me. So it's there are a lot of factors that go into it. I can't say, well, you're in a situation and the coach says, well, you're not going to play, so you should leave. Things can happen. You can start being the best player in training and the coach all of a sudden wants you to play, even though he said you're not in his plans. Someone could get injured and you step in and you end up taking over someone's spot. So there's a lot of moving pieces to it, and there's no, black or white answer to it. But, my recommendation is always, regardless of whether or not they're like, look, this is not going to work out, you need to leave or whatever, be professional, keep working. If the situation changes, great. If it doesn't, well, but, don't have anyone say that you were never professional enough. And, after they had a conversation with you, you never showed up to training looking like you wanted to play. So, regardless of the situation, be 100% professional, go to work and do your work. Try to be the best that you can be every day, even well in knowing that you may not get your chance to go play again.
Yeah. Did you ever see players that kind of hurt themselves by not treating it professional when things like that happened?
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. Because then that's ammunition that can be used against you in the future. Yeah. Like some coach can call saying, hey, what do you think about this guy?
Yeah.
And then it could be like, well, he's lazy. He wasn't willing to put in the work. He's just not professional.
Yeah. And I'm sure you noticed. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. And well, and knowing that the coach told the player that he's not in his plans. And the coach would say, look, like, you're being paid. This is your job. You should come to work every day and you should do your best. So not everyone can be there mentally during those situations, but the better you can be, the better it'll be for your career long term.
Because I'm sure you notice kind of how small the football world really is at those levels. It seems like everybody knows everybody, and it'd be very quick for someone to make a phone call and say, hey, what's going on with this guy? And well, he's not really training anymore, and he's not taking it seriously, the situation that he's in.
Yeah, it's 100% happened, like multiple times. I've seen it happen to all teammates, where someone like my agent may have said, yes, what do you think about this guy? I'm like, here's what I think. And they're like, yeah, the coach says that he's just not professional enough. So I don't think this is going to work. And the coaches, they all talk. They're quote unquote friends.
Yeah.
So they may have played together at some point. They may have done a coaching course at some point. So, they do talk.
Yeah. Community is small. The circle is definitely small. So when you return to San Jose kind of full-time after the loan, obviously, and then you're on the permanent deal in San Jose, is kind of in those early years when you're playing with San Jose, is this where you felt like this is kind of where I want to play for the next couple of years? Because obviously I see that there's the season that you spent in Salt Lake as well.
Yeah, so I wanted to end my career in San Jose. And then granted, it's not like I was 22 years old, right? I was getting older and looking for more stability and, trying to think about life after playing, even though no one ever wants to think about that. So, but yeah, it was those 2 years were good 2 years. The first year, we just had a year where we were just unlucky. We were playing well. We were playing some of the best football that I've been on playing as a San Jose team, but we weren't getting the results. We could outshoot teams. We could dominate teams and end up giving up a goal in the last 2 minutes to draw or lose the game. So from a point standpoint, we didn't do great. We didn't make the playoffs that year. But the following year, we ended up winning the Supporters Shield. We were the best team during the regular season. We had one of the highest point totals ever in MLS. So not saying that, and I personally don't think that we played as great as we did the previous year, but we're getting the results. So, but yeah, so it's not always a better team on the day that wins.
Yeah. It's again kind of like we were speaking to when we talked about the game against England, right? It's any team on the day can win as long as you back yourself, believe yourself. That's the beauty of those, those cup competitions that you mentioned before, FA Cup, Pokal, anywhere in the world. Should ever a fourth division team beat a first division team? No. And obviously this isn't the same situation in terms of what you're dealing with in the MLS, but that's kind of the blessing and the curse that football is.
Definitely. It happens. You see it happen all the time in these FA Cup games that
Yeah,
the the Premier League team doesn't always beat the fourth division.
yeah, absolutely. It's the beauty of those tournaments. It's why people love them so much.
Definitely.
And you mentioned kind of now as we're getting towards the end of your career, how, no one ever really wants to look at life after playing. And that's so true. And did you kind of struggle with that at all? Kind of when you were getting towards the end of your playing career, did you have a moment where you knew, okay, I'm ready to do it. Let's close this chapter, or was it kind of a bit of a more murky situation for you?
You know, during my career, there were many times that I thought that this would be the end.
Really?
Like after the first 2 years in Kansas City, I thought that could have been the end. After, I don't know, AIK before I went to Allison, I thought that could have been the end. Came back to San Jose, they didn't pick up my option that first time. I thought it would have been the end. And then going to Salt Lake, we went to both finals and unfortunately lost both finals. I didn't pick up my option again for financial reasons. So I thought that could have been the end again. So yeah, there were many times where you thought it would be the end, you just don't know, and then luckily things happen, someone picks you up. So those last 2 years in San Jose, my salary got cut to nothing, and I was kind of forced to think about the future. Not that I wanted to, even though I was in my mid-30s and I thought I was Superman and I could play forever. But it was time for me. When I stopped, it was time. Played for 12 years and got to experience a lot.
Yeah.
And it was time to move on.
What's that like just as a career, to have that a couple times over in your career where you're like, man, is this it? And then, okay, I got something again. And, 2 years later, you're like, well, is this it? Like, I don't think, besides professional sports, I can't think of another career where it's like that.
Seriously. Like, I really don't think there's any other career outside of sports where it's like that. So it's like, yep, this was great while it lasted. I thought it would have lasted 20 years, but, it's been 2 years. It's been a good 2 years. So, and then you get 2 more years. You're like, great, this is awesome. And then you keep going. But no, it was definitely a roller coaster at times.
Yeah. It's like you said at the top, that average career is 3 years. So it's almost like once you hit that 4th year and 5th year, you're like, I'm just playing with house money now. Like, this is just bonus.
Exactly. So that would pop up too. It's like, I did get 5 years. I got more than the average. So I guess I should be grateful and thankful. And, this is a good ride.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And to close this out here, to wrap it up, kind of talk to me about what's cooking now. Obviously, we transitioned to that degree that we had in the back pocket, and now using a little bit of that on a day-to-day basis. So what's been the last couple of years like outside of the game? Are you still kind of involved in the game at all a little bit, or any of those types of things?
So I'm here in San Jose. I moved into tech. San Jose is the epicenter of tech.
Yeah.
Silicon Valley is a stretch between San Jose and San Francisco. So for me, it was, after meeting like 400 people, it was, you should go into tech. And, I ended up at Adobe in a sales role. I wanted to do something where I was meeting people, building relationships, and, being the guy who could fix everything. So, majored in economics with a lot of psychology, would have gone into investment banking or consulting had I not gone into playing. But those industries are very structured, and it would take, 10 years to get anywhere. So I figured, where could I start where, even if I started with a recent college grad, that, 3, 4, 5 years from now, we wouldn't be on the same level, that our trajectories would be different because of being older and being more personal and having that experience. So started in sales. Adobe is an awesome company, learned a lot. 2 years later, moved to CrowdStrike, cybersecurity company, great experience. And then now I'm at Cisco doing go-to-market, working on launching these new products. So, I'm actually super proud of where I've gotten to in the last 5, 6 years. I've moved up pretty quickly, and yeah, life goes on, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's Yeah, it's so unique to be able to have these, now you get these two completely unique and separate careers. And that's such a cool experience you have. And you definitely should be proud of that, because there's a lot that you have accomplished so far, and so much more to come.
Yeah, exactly. So much more to come.
Yeah.
We're still young at heart, you know.
Absolutely. Well, this has been so much fun. I learned so much, and I'm so happy that I got the chance to have you on and talk to you. And, again, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and sharing some of your insights with all of us.
Yeah, man, it was definitely a pleasure. Thanks for the conversation. I'm looking forward to keeping in touch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, that was Khari Stephenson. Absolute legend. So grateful to have him on the show. I want to thank him again for being in the 11 this week. An amazing story to share with myself and with all of you. So again, can't thank him enough. Thank you to all of you who listened and stayed tuned for this whole episode. And especially a thank you to those of you who rated or reviewed the podcast. As I mentioned at the top, it is a quick thing that you can do to help the podcast grow, and I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. So if you didn't do it at the top, if you could do it right now, boom, quick little 5 stars, then I'll get you out of here. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.